What if the most dangerous wars are not fought on the battlefield, but in the depths of our minds? What if the real conflict is the one we can't see, touch, or hear, but it shapes everything we do, everything we think, and every decision we make? It's the war we all face, whether we acknowledge it or not, the battle that defines who we are and who we become. In today's world, we are constantly told what to think, what to buy, who to trust, and how to act. We are influenced by governments, corporations, the media, and even our social circles. But we must ask ourselves, are these external forces actually shaping us, or are they simply tapping into something deeper within? A power that resides within each of us, beneath the surface of conscious thought. The war that takes place in our minds is one of invisible forces. Forces that shape our perceptions, our behavior, and our reality. Forces that we are often not even aware of, but that largely control how we experience life. From how we view the world to how we perceive ourselves, the unconscious is the battlefield where this war is fought. Carl Jung, a pioneering Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, offered a revolutionary view of consciousness, a view that challenged our understanding of ourselves and our behavior. Jung's work focused not only on the surface thoughts of the mind, but also on the deeper, darker realms of the unconscious. He argued that within the unconscious, there is a vast network of hidden forces, drives, and symbols that influence our actions and thoughts more than we realize. These forces, Jung suggested, shape our attitudes, our fears, our desires, and even our beliefs. They are the invisible hands that direct the course of our lives. In this video, we will explore the powerful ideas that Jung introduced to the world, theories that illuminate the hidden battles that take place within us. By understanding Jung's work, we can begin to recognize these internal conflicts, confront the unconscious forces that control us, and ultimately gain mastery over our own minds. On this journey, we will discover that the real war is not happening outside of us. It is happening inside of us. And the sooner we realize this, the sooner we can take control of our own psyche and thereby change the world around us. Carl Jung is one of the most important and influential figures in the history of modern psychology. Initially trained by Sigmund Freud, Jung eventually moved away from Freud's more deterministic view of the psyche, developing his own groundbreaking theories that forever changed the landscape of psychology. While Freud focused primarily on the role of repressed desires and early childhood experiences in shaping the mind, Jung looked deeper. He proposed that the mind is shaped not only by personal experiences, but by universal, shared experiences that transcend the individual. Jung's most revolutionary idea was the concept collective unconscious. Unlike Freud, who believed that the unconscious was simply a repository of forgotten memories and repressed desires, Jung argued that it contained a much deeper, more general layer of human experience. According to Jung, the collective unconscious is a reservoir of memories, symbols, and archetypes inherited from our ancestors. These elements are not shaped by our personal lives, but are universal, embedded deep in the human psyche and affecting all people across time and culture. At the core of the collective unconscious are archetypes, universal patterns, and symbols, embedded in human experience. These archetypes are not learned through life experiences. Instead, they are ingrained within us, shaping how we perceive the world, others, and ourselves. Jung identified many of these archetypes, such as the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, and the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche. Each of these archetypes represents a fundamental human experience, and they often appear in the myths, legends, and stories of different cultures, as well as in our dreams. Jung believed that these archetypes are more than just abstract symbols. They are unconscious forces that influence our behavior and decisions. For example, when we are faced with a difficult situation, we may find ourselves acting in ways similar to those of a hero or warrior, drawing on these deep archetypal patterns of strength and direction. However, not all archetypes are inherently positive. Shadow, another critical concept in Jung's work, represents the darker, repressed aspects of the psyche, qualities that we deny or hide from ourselves. The shadow is often projected onto others, causing us to see qualities in people or groups that we do not understand or fear. By recognizing the existence of these archetypes, we can better understand the forces that shape human behavior. Jung proposed that in order to live a fulfilling life, people must engage in a process individuation. The path to integrating these unconscious elements, including the shadow, into our conscious self. It is through this process that we become whole, embracing all aspects of our personality and consciousness, rather than being subject to unconscious forces. Jung's theories not only provided a profound understanding of the individual psyche, but also helped shape the broader human experience. His work showed that we are not isolated in our thoughts and emotions. There is a larger, collective dimension to our inner lives that connects all people. Jung's understanding of the psyche and the collective unconscious continues to influence not only psychology, but philosophy, art, and culture, offering a profound way to think about human existence and the invisible forces that govern it. Jung's exploration of the human mind provided a radically new lens through which we can view both ourselves and the world. It is a prism that goes beyond personal experience and looks at the common, often hidden structures that govern our behavior. His work illuminates the complexity and depth of the mind, offering us tools to understand the deepest internal conflicts that shape our world. One of Carl Jung's most compelling and transformative ideas was the concept of shadow of yourself. The shadow represents the darker, often unconscious aspect of the psyche, the parts of ourselves that we tend to repress or deny. These are the traits, desires, and instincts that we find unacceptable, whether because of social norms, moral standards, or our own fear of confronting them. The shadow contains everything we reject about ourselves: our rage, envy, selfishness, and vulnerability, as well as those characteristics we consider bad or immoral. Essentially, the shadow is the sum of all the parts of ourselves that we would rather not acknowledge. However, Jung did not suggest that these dark elements of our psyche are inherently evil or negative. On the contrary, the shadow is a vital part of who we are. It contains the raw, unfiltered energy of our unconscious, and its traits are often those that, if properly integrated, can give us a deeper understanding of ourselves and greater power. But when we suppress the shadow, we risk it coming out in unhealthy and destructive ways, often influencing our actions without us even realizing it. The shadow does not only affect our inner world, it affects how we interact with other people and the world at large. It often manifests externally, shaping the way we perceive other people or entire groups. This projection is the unconscious act of seeing our own repressed traits in others, which can lead to irrational hatred or fear. For example, a person who has not come to terms with his anger may find himself reacting strongly to people he perceives as angry or aggressive, without realizing that this reaction is fueled by his own repressed emotions. In this way, the shadow causes social friction, leading to misunderstandings, prejudices, and conflicts. Jung argued that in order to live a fully integrated life, people must confront their shadow. This process, known as shadow work, involves acknowledging the suppressed parts of ourselves, accepting them, and eventually integrating them into our conscious identity. In doing so, we gain not only a more complete sense of self, but also the ability to act more consciously and authentically in the world. The shadow is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, accepted, and made part of the whole person. Besides the shadow, another important concept in Jungian psychology is the idea archetypes. Archetypes are universal, recurring, symbols and themes that emerge from the collective unconscious. They are the fundamental building blocks of human experience, representing the primal instincts, emotions, and desires that have shaped human societies throughout history. These archetypes manifest themselves in myths, stories, religions, and even in the very fabric of our daily lives, often without our even realizing it. Jung identified many archetypes, including the hero, the wise old man, the mother, and the trickster. Each archetype represents a universal aspect of human existence, embodying common experiences and struggles that transcend cultural boundaries. These symbols serve as models of behavior and understanding, shaping our worldview and influencing the choices we make. For example, the hero archetype is often associated with journeys of personal transformation, in which a person overcomes obstacles and emerges stronger. The hero story is found across cultures in countless mythologies, from King Arthur to Luke Skywalker. However, these archetypes are not just abstract psychological constructs. They are deeply rooted in the culture, politics, and society in which we live. These symbolic patterns continue to influence how we perceive ourselves, others, and the world around us. For example, the victim archetype can be seen in both individual behavior and social narratives. This can manifest in an individual who sees themselves as powerless and helpless, or in the broader context of a victim role used for political or ideological gain. Similarly, archetypes such as the savior or martyr can be manipulated to evoke emotions of loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication to a cause, often becoming tools of political or social control. The influence of archetypes extends beyond personal behavior. They shape collective ideologies, cultural trends, and even social movements. The way we interact with others is often colored by the archetypes we unconsciously embody or project onto them. This is why social tensions often seem so deep and intractable, because these are not just ideological battles, but battles of archetypal forces competing for expression. Whether in politics, religion, or even the media, the power of archetypes is used to shape public perception, to divide and unite. Both the shadow and the archetype speak of deeper forces at work within us, forces that are not always visible or understandable, but which govern much of our behavior. The more we learn to recognize these forces, the more we can understand how they shape our lives and our society. And the more we encounter the shadows within us, the more we become aware of the archetypal forces at work in the world. It is through this process of self-awareness and understanding that we can move beyond unconscious projections and begin to create more harmonious, integrated societies. The power of the mind, once understood through the work of Carl Jung, has found a dark echo in the modern world, where external forces, media, advertising, and political propaganda manipulate the unconscious to shape perceptions and control behavior. Jung's theories provide a framework for understanding how these forces use the psyche, especially the shadow, to create fear, manipulate emotions, and influence public opinion. These forces are not abstract or benign. They are active and purposeful in their efforts to control the masses. In Jungian psychology, the unconscious is the part of the psyche that is most susceptible to outside influence. Although our conscious mind can reason, evaluate, and critique information, the unconscious operates on a much more primitive level. It is here in the unconscious that fears, desires, and deeply held beliefs take root, often beyond our conscious awareness. For example, the shadow self, which represents the hidden, repressed aspects of our personality, can be easily triggered by outside stimuli. Propaganda, the media, and advertising are masters at awakening primal, irrational parts of the psyche, those deeply buried fears, anxieties, and desires that can drive us to action or inaction. Consider, for example, how the media often uses fear to elicit an emotional response. Portraying the other in a negative light, whether it be a particular group, nation, or ideology, often casts the shadows. It creates fear, anger, and mistrust by tapping into unconscious biases that are often rooted in our shadows. This fear-based manipulation is effective precisely because it bypasses rational thinking and triggers the unconscious fears that live within us. The more we fear the other, the less likely we are to critically evaluate the veracity of the information we are being fed. Instead, we respond emotionally, driven by a primal need for self-preservation and belonging to a tribe. This manipulation goes beyond fear. It also preys on our desires. Advertising, for example, is designed to exploit our unconscious need for recognition, acceptance, and status. It promises satisfaction, happiness, and success through the acquisition of goods or the adoption of a certain lifestyle. These messages are designed to resonate deeply with our unconscious desires, which often have little to do with the actual products being sold. Jung believed that we are constantly looking for a way to integrate various parts of our unconscious into our conscious lives, and advertising exploits this by creating the illusion of wholeness and self-fulfillment. This is why the act of buying becomes so tied to identity, because it taps into deep psychological needs that go beyond mere material acquisition. Political propaganda works in much the same way, manipulating the collective fears and desires of the masses. Politicians and leaders often use the hero archetype to create a salvation narrative, positioning themselves as saviors who will protect the people from an existential threat. These leaders often play on the victim archetype, presenting the masses as helpless and oppressed, while simultaneously offering themselves as the solution to the crisis. In doing so, they exploit both the shadow and the archetypes, evoking feelings of helplessness, fear, and a desire for protection from external threats. This manipulation is not subtle. It plays on deep-seated psychological dynamics to create a sense of loyalty and control. Jung's work also helps explain how these psychological manipulations operate at a social level. The collective unconscious doesn't just reside within individuals. It is shared across groups, cultures, and nations. Political ideologies, religions, and cultural movements tap into the collective unconscious by creating narratives that resonate with people on a deeply emotional and psychological level. These ideologies often offer simple black and white answers to complex problems, providing a clear distinction between us and them, good and evil, that deeply appeals to the unconscious. This simplification of complex realities helps people make sense of a chaotic world, but it also keeps them trapped in a cycle of unconscious beliefs that is free of critical questioning. The most insidious aspect of media manipulation is that it often operates without a person's knowledge. Much of the content we consume on a daily basis, news, entertainment, advertising, shapes our worldview and influences our decisions in ways we may never be fully aware of. Whether through framing, selective reporting, or emotional appeal, the media continually reinforces a particular narrative, guiding our thoughts and beliefs without our realizing it. This constant, pervasive manipulation of the unconscious is a powerful tool for those who wish to control the masses, as it ensures that the ideas we are fed are not just accepted, but internalized. In this section, we are asked to become aware of the extent to which our thinking, beliefs, and behavior are influenced by external forces. To what extent is our view of the world truly our own? Are our perceptions shaped by unconscious forces that are deliberately activated by media, advertising, and political messages? To free ourselves from this manipulation, we must first become aware of the extent to which our thinking is shaped by these invisible forces. Only then can we begin the difficult work of reclaiming the autonomy of our minds. By understanding Jung's ideas about the unconscious and the power of the shadow, we can become more aware of how external forces manipulate us. We can begin to question the narratives we are told, uncover the psychological triggers that are used against us, and reclaim our ability to think independently. The real battle is not just against these external forces. It is a battle for the freedom of our minds, the freedom to think for ourselves and see the world clearly. The 20th century was a period marked not only by political upheaval and global conflict, but also by unprecedented levels of psychological manipulation. Governments, political leaders, and ideologies used the power of propaganda and psychological warfare to control and shape entire populations. Carl Jung's theories about the unconscious, particularly his concepts of the shadow self and the collective unconscious, provide a powerful framework for understanding how these psychological forces were exploited on a massive scale. In this section, we will look at how these ideas were used to manipulate society in some of the most significant events of the 20th century, such as Nazi Germany, the Cold War, and the rise of mass consumerism. The rise of Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler is perhaps the most striking example of how Jung's theories can explain the psychological manipulation of society. Hitler and his regime understood the unconscious dynamics of fear and projection, using propaganda to manipulate the collective shadow of the German people. By projecting their fears, insecurities, and desires onto the Jewish population and other minority groups, the Nazi regime created a powerful us versus them narrative, turning the Jewish people into the ultimate other and a scapegoat for Germany's economic and social problems. This is a direct manifestation of Jung's idea that the shadow can be projected outward, often in the form of hatred or fear, onto an outgroup. Jung believed that the collective unconscious is common to all people and contains archetypal symbols and patterns that transcend time and culture. In the case of Nazi Germany, Hitler and his propaganda machine took advantage of these deeply ingrained symbols using archetypes such as the hero, the victim, and the enemy. Germans were presented as a heroic master race, fighting for their survival against an evil and corrupt enemy. Jewish people, along with other minorities, were seen as the embodiment of the enemy, alien, dangerous, and threatening the purity of the nation. This manipulation was not only psychological, it was strategic in its use of fear and identity. Using these powerful archetypes, the Nazis created a false narrative that justified violence, persecution, and war. The Cold War, which defined much of the second half of the 20th century, is another terrifying example of psychological warfare. On a global scale, the ideological battle between the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union, was fought not only with nuclear weapons and military force, but also through the psychological manipulation of the masses. Both sides sought to control the hearts and minds of their people by creating an atmosphere of fear, mistrust, and existential threat. Jung's theory of the collective unconscious can explain how both superpowers exploited the deep psychological fears of their citizens. In the United States, fear of communism was used to unite the population under the banner of democracy and freedom. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, saw its ideological struggle as a battle against Western imperialism and capitalist exploitation. In both cases, leaders manipulated the collective unconscious to create a sense of identity and a common enemy, which was necessary to maintain power. The other, whether communism or capitalism, became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world, creating a deep rift between East and West, further deepening the ideological conflict. Fear and mistrust of the other were further exacerbated by the rise of mass consumerism in the post-World War II world. As Western countries began to recover from the war, consumer culture became a central force in shaping social values and beliefs. Advertising, television shows, and other media began to shape people's desires, telling them not only what to buy, but who they should be. The collective unconscious was exposed to carefully crafted narratives that promised happiness, fulfillment, and success through consumption. Jung's concept of the shadow personality is particularly relevant here, as the rise of mass consumerism has capitalized on the repressed desires of the shadow. The shadow contains our unacknowledged desires, our desire for status, recognition, and material success. Advertisers, understanding these unconscious desires, have used them to manipulate the masses into believing that their value is tied to their ability to consume. This has created a society in which people constantly seek external validation through the acquisition of goods, further repressing the deeper, more authentic aspects of their psyche. In all of these historical examples, we can see the exploitation of the unconscious, whether through propaganda, fear, or mass consumption. Political leaders in the media realized that by manipulating the collective unconscious, they could control entire populations. Fear, desire, and the projection of the shadow onto others created an environment in which people were trapped in their own internal battles, while external forces shaped their beliefs, identities, and actions. These forces, although invisible, had a profound effect on the direction of history, steering entire societies toward the wars, conflicts, and ideologies that defined the 20th century. Jung's work helps us understand that the unconscious is not just a personal experience but a collective one, and when those in power understand how to harness this shared unconscious, they will be able to control not only individuals, but entire societies. The psychological warfare of the 20th century shows us the dangers of allowing outside forces to manipulate our minds and our perceptions of the world. It also makes us question how much of our thinking today is shaped by these same unconscious forces. At the heart of Carl Jung's psychological concept is a powerful idea: the struggle for autonomy. Although the external world is often filled with distractions, ideologies, and influences that seek to shape us, true freedom, true self-awareness, this can only be achieved by confronting the internal forces that control our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. This is the essence of Jung's concept, individuation, the lifelong process of becoming the person you were meant to be by integrating all parts of yourself, including those parts you have repressed or denied. The battle for autonomy is fought, not in the outside world, but in the depths of our own psyche. Jung believed that the unconscious is filled with powerful forces that we often ignore or repress. These forces, which include the shadow, the dark, hidden parts of ourselves, drive much of our behavior without us even realizing it. Our desires, fears, and prejudices often arise from these unconscious urges, which shape our perception of the world and how we interact with others. However, as long as these forces remain unconscious, we are not truly in control of our lives. We are at the mercy of these hidden impulses, trapped in patterns of behavior that may not align with our true desires or values. To break out of this cycle, Jung argued that we must engage in the difficult but essential work of self-awareness. The first step in this process is confronting the shadow, acknowledging those parts of ourselves that we have long ignored or repressed. The shadow is often the repository of everything we find uncomfortable or unacceptable about ourselves, our fears, our insecurities, our vices. But it is here that much of our untapped potential lies. By confronting the shadow and accepting it as part of ourselves, we gain not only a deeper understanding of who we are, but also the ability to harness these unconscious forces for positive change. The process of individuation requires self-reflection and introspection. We take the time to examine our thoughts, beliefs, and motivations. It is about becoming aware of the patterns in our lives, the ways in which we may unconsciously respond to situations based on past experiences or social conditioning. This kind of self-reflection forces us to question our assumptions, reconsider our beliefs, and examine the reasons for our fears and desires. It is through this introspection that we begin to uncover the hidden motives that shape our actions and begin to free ourselves from the psychological conditioning imposed on us by society, culture, and the media. Jung's concept of myself, an integrated whole that encompasses both the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, serves the purpose of individuation. It is not a static state, but a dynamic process of constant growth and self-awareness. As we integrate more of the unconscious into our conscious lives, we become more authentic, more attuned to our true selves, and more able to make choices that are in line with our deepest values and aspirations. The war for autonomy is thus not about external victories, but about achieving mastery over our inner world, confronting the forces that move us, and embracing the complexity of who we are. However, the process of individuation is not easy. It requires us to acknowledge uncomfortable truths about ourselves, the prejudices we hold, the fears we harbor, and aspects of our identity that we would rather deny. In a world that constantly pressures us to conform, to accept predetermined beliefs, and to follow collective norms, the path to autonomy requires courage and resilience. It is a journey of self-discovery that may alienate us from others or make us feel out of tune with society's expectations. But only through this process of confrontation and integration can we find true freedom. Social conditioning imposed by media, culture, and politics is pervasive and often hidden, shaping our attitudes and behavior without our even realizing it. Media, advertising, and political ideologies shape the way we see the world, framing issues in ways that serve the interests of those in power. They play on our unconscious biases, fears, and desires, guiding us toward certain beliefs or actions, without ever inviting us to question our underlying motives. In this way, we often find ourselves trapped in a continuous cycle of manipulation that perpetuates the very forces that seek to control us. To free ourselves from this psychological conditioning, we must actively challenge the narratives that have been imposed on us. This is not only about rejecting the external influences around us, but also about confronting the internal forces that shape our reactions to these influences. By recognizing the unconscious patterns in our thoughts and behavior, we begin to regain control of our minds and our lives. The struggle for autonomy is not an external battle against society or other people. It is an internal battle to reclaim the power of self-awareness and live in alignment with our true selves. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, what parts of your own psyche remain hidden, locked in the shadows? What unconscious beliefs or fears shape your actions without your knowledge? Are you living your life on your own terms, or are you simply reacting to the external forces that surround you? The path to autonomy begins with self-awareness, and only through the process of individuation can we begin to free ourselves from the invisible forces that control our lives and step into the fullness of our own potential. In the digital age, the battleground for the human mind has shifted from the physical to the virtual. Social media platforms have become modern arenas of psychological warfare, not with weapons, but with ideas, images, and emotions. Here, Carl Jung's understanding of the unconscious offers a lens through which we can understand the profound impact these platforms have on our individual and collective psyches. In this section, we will look at how social media manipulates the collective unconscious, feeds primal desires, and creates echo chambers that reinforce unconscious biases and fears. At the core of Jung's work is the idea that the unconscious shapes much of human behavior, often without our realizing it. In the digital world, this unconscious is increasingly exploited. Social media platforms, driven by complex algorithms, are designed to capture and manipulate our attention, catering to our most primal desires: validation, attention, and belonging. These platforms tap into the collective unconscious, feeding on universal human needs that Jung believed were deeply rooted in our psyche. One of the most important ways that social media influences the unconscious is through the desire for validation. Jung argued that part of the unconscious struggle is to integrate the ego with deeper aspects of the psyche, which requires a sense of wholeness and validation. In today's society, social media provides instant gratification for this need. Likes, comments, and shares serve as external validation that confirms our sense of self-worth. However, this constant cycle of seeking approval from others can perpetuate the shadow aspect of the psyche, our unconscious fear of rejection, loneliness, and inadequacy. This external validation reinforces the unconscious desire for status and social recognition, often at the expense of more authentic and deeper connections. The desire for validation isn't the only psychological mechanism at work in the digital world. Social media thrives on attention, feeding our subconscious with the need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. Algorithms curate our feeds based on our preferences, ensuring that we are bombarded with content that matches our existing beliefs and interests. This creates a constant stream of reinforcement for the unconscious biases we already have. In essence, social media not only attracts attention, it manipulates it. It offers content that evokes emotional responses: outrage, excitement, fear, feeding our instincts and unconscious impulses, ensuring that our attention is captured and our engagement is maximized. This dynamic has given rise to a phenomenon: echo chamber, a psychological mechanism in which people are primarily exposed to information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs. Echo chambers thrive on social media, where algorithms prioritize content that reinforces existing views and suppresses alternative viewpoints. When we are surrounded by like-minded people or content, our unconscious biases are reinforced. We become more entrenched in our beliefs, less likely to question them, and more intolerant of differing opinions. This creates a feedback loop in which our unconscious fears and biases become stronger, amplifying the very divisions we seek to avoid. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious is particularly relevant here. He proposed that there is a common psychological landscape that unites all of humanity, a shared pool of memories, archetypes, and symbols that influence our thoughts and behavior. In the digital age, social media platforms amplify this collective unconscious, turning it into a space that is easily manipulated. Political movements, social causes, and cultural trends are no longer influenced solely by rational discourse or personal interactions. They are amplified and shaped by collective emotions and unconscious fears that are spread through social media. Current events demonstrate how this manipulation is playing out in real time. From political polarization to the spread of conspiracy theories, social media platforms have become incubators of collective psychological phenomena. The spread of misinformation, fueled by confirmation bias and emotional manipulation, has created deep social cleavages in which groups are divided not only by ideological differences, but also by the unconscious forces at work. These forces, fear, anxiety, and tribalism, are constantly amplified by algorithms designed to prioritize sensational, emotionally charged content. As a result, the psychological warfare that Jung warned us about is not just a historical or philosophical problem. It is playing out on a global scale in real time on our screens. The impact of this digital manipulation extends beyond the collective. On an individual level, constant exposure to carefully curated content can negatively impact mental health. Research has shown that heavy social media use is associated with increased feelings of isolation, anxiety, and depression. This is not simply a result of comparing ourselves to others, but because social media exacerbates the shadow aspects of our psyche, our fears of inadequacy, our desire for recognition, and our unconscious need to belong. The pressure to perform, to present a carefully curated, idealized version of ourselves, creates a dissonance between our true selves and the personas we create online. This dissonance contributes to a sense of internal conflict as people struggle to reconcile their online persona with their real-life persona. Jung's theories of the collective unconscious and the shadow provide crucial insight into the psychological dynamics at work in the digital age. Social media is not just a communication tool. It is a powerful psychological tool that influences both individual and collective behavior. It exploits our deepest desires and unconscious fears, creating echo chambers that amplify prejudices and emotional reactions, ultimately leading to greater polarization and division. To free ourselves from this manipulation, we must first become aware of the forces at work within our own minds. The challenge is to recognize how much of our worldview is shaped by unconscious biases, and how social media platforms reinforce these biases to control the narrative. By becoming more aware of these dynamics, we can begin to regain control over our thoughts and behaviors, freeing ourselves from the digital echo chambers that seek to control our minds. As we have discovered throughout this journey, the real war is not fought with weapons, but in the human mind. It is a war that is fought in the quiet corners of our consciousness, in the hidden corners of our psyche. The battles we face are not always visible, but they shape our every thought, every action, and every belief. This war is about our hearts and minds, a struggle to maintain autonomy in a world that seeks to manipulate, control, and influence our deepest thoughts and desires. The forces waging this war are often hidden. They operate in the background of our consciousness, shaping us through the media we consume, the ideologies we follow, and the unconscious fears and desires that drive our decisions. These forces are not just external, they are deeply internal, connected to the shadows within us, the parts of ourselves we hide, repress, or do not acknowledge. To truly gain control over our lives, we must confront these internal forces, bring them to light, and integrate them into our consciousness. Carl Jung's concept of individuation offers a way forward in this battle. Individuation is the process of becoming who we are truly meant to be, by recognizing and integrating all aspects of our psyche, both light and shadow. It is a path to greater self-awareness that requires courage, introspection, and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truth about ourselves, in the face of the manipulation that permeates our culture, through media, politics, and consumerism. We must take responsibility for our own mental and emotional autonomy. The path to individuation is not an easy one, but it is the only way to break free from the unconscious forces that seek to control us. To combat this internal war, we must also acknowledge the collective unconscious that unites us all, the narratives we consume. The fears that are reinforced and the prejudices that are reinforced are not just personal, they are communal. As we become more self-aware, we not only regain control of our own minds, but we also begin to influence the collective consciousness, guiding it toward greater unity, understanding, and empowerment. Ultimately, the question we must ask ourselves is, how much of our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions are truly ours? Are we living consciously, or are we simply reacting to invisible forces seeking to control us? The inner war is not simply a battle for personal freedom. It is a call to consciousness. Recognizing the forces that shape us, confronting them, and taking back our power is the key to winning this war. The real battle is within, and it is a battle we must wage consciously, courageously, and responsibly. The question is, are you ready to face the inner war and find your true autonomy?